Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight,
I'm Tan Ikram. I'm the Deputy Senior District Judge for England and Wales.
he certainly is. Shocking new details about the Palestine paraglider judge, plus a big grooming gangs exclusive that you do not want to miss. Also,
The economy has officially entered into recession.
I reveal the thing that nobody wants to tell you about our recession. And the polls close at 10 p.m. in 2 by-elections. We will be at the counts as Britain votes. Plus,
certainly shouldn't be acceptable in a party like mine that is proud to be both anti-racist but also anti-Semitic.
Ooh, an honest slip-up there from Sadiq. But we discuss the shocking rise in anti-Semitism. Raring to go on my panel it is, of course, Star Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Lord Sean Bailey and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Larzer. Oh, and what's going on here? Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Time to investigate the judges. Next.
Good evening. The top story from the GB newsroom tonight. The Chancellor says there is light at the end of the tunnel if the government sticks to its economic plan, despite the UK entering into a recession. Official figures out today show the economy shrank by 0.3% at the end of 2023 after similar contractions in the previous 3 months. And that's the first time the UK's GDP has dropped since the first half of 2020 after the first COVID lockdown. Labour says the government is completely out of touch with people's reality. In Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon's been accused of being addicted to a culture of covering up and keeping the public in the dark during her first time as First Minister. She's under pressure to address Holyrood personally after it was revealed that 0 of her WhatsApp messages during the pandemic were transferred to the government's records. Sturgeon has defended deleting those messages, saying it was in line with official advice. Freedom of information requests show other ministers, including Humza Yousaf, also failed to transfer their messages. Opposition leaders are demanding an urgent explanation, accusing the SNP of a culture of secrecy. Detectives are saying they are keeping an open mind about whether the murder of a 16-year-old in Bristol last night is linked to other recent attacks. The teenage victim died in what police have described as a sickening stabbing by 2 attackers wearing masks who then fled the scene on bicycles. It comes just weeks after the deaths of teenagers Mason Rist and Max Dixon, who were also stabbed in Bristol. Police have now got enhanced stop-and-search powers across the city after confirming there are currently no suspects. Clusters of measles cases are emerging across the UK outside the original outbreak in the West Midlands. The UK's health agency has reported cases in London, the North West, Yorkshire and Humber and the East Midlands. And it's warning hundreds of thousands of children in England are unvaccinated against the disease and remain at risk of serious complications or even lifelong disabilities. Figures show the total number of cases since October has risen by more than 400. Football and Crystal Palace manager Roy Hodgson is in a stable condition, we're told, after falling ill during the team's training today. The 76-year-old was due to speak at a scheduled news conference for Monday's game against Everton. That has had to be cancelled, the Premier League club confirming he's been undergoing tests in hospital this afternoon and this evening. So, voters are casting their ballots in the final hours of 2 by-elections taking place in Wellingborough, in Northamptonshire, and Kingswood, in South Gloucestershire right now. The Kingswood vote was triggered after Conservative Chris Skidmore quit in protest over the government's green policy. In Wellingborough, polls are open after Peter Bone was accused of bullying and sexual misconduct. He, though, denied those allegations. They've only got an hour left to vote. It closes at 10 o'clock. We'll be broadcasting throughout the night with expert analysis and all-important results from midnight tonight right through to breakfast. For the very latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
We need an urgent investigation into bias within the judiciary. Deputy Senior District Judge Tan Ikram, who inexplicably decided to spare the pro-Palestinian paraglider protesters jail time, has been caught out making a message that called Israel and the UK terrorists. He claimed it was an innocent mistake, but then he deleted his LinkedIn profile, apparently, which does beg the question what else was on there. Mr Ikram has been praised in articles as a trailblazer, the son of immigrants who was born and raised in Wolverhampton Poly. But he appears to be blazing a new trail now by dishing out lenient sentences for people who are found guilty of terror offences on the streets of Britain. He gave them a 12-month conditional discharge instead on the basis that he did not believe that they were true Hamas supporters, and emotions had run very high at the time of their offence. Funny that, though, isn't it? Considering he sent former police constable James Watts to prison for 20 weeks after he shared racist jokes in a WhatsApp group and then appeared to boast about that whilst he was doing the events in America. Remarkable. So, just to be clear, people who the CPS described as engaging in the glorification of racist terrorism on the streets of London walk free. And a cop who shares a racist joke in a private WhatsApp group, jail time. Both deplorable acts with incredibly different consequences. It's also worth noting that one of those convicted is Hiba al-Hayek, who was granted asylum in Britain, wait for it, because her family wanted to flee Gaza to escape Hamas. She and her fellow protesters were given support at court by a veteran Guardian journalist, Victoria Britton. Britton provided context as a defence of the paraglider symbol that had landed the trio in the dock. She is also the former Guardian deputy foreign editor who was surveilled by MI5 after allegedly writing the cheques that funded Ghanaian military top officer Kojo Sikata's lawsuit of The Independent in the mid-90s. She is also a trustee of the Palestine Book Awards and Palestine Festival of Literature. Of course she is. But this story seemingly gets worse. It's been revealed that Tan Ikram is on the Judiciary Appointments Commission. It's the independent body that selects candidates for the judicial office in courts and tribunals in England and Wales. Now, a cursory glance through the other members of that commission reveal it also includes the Right Reverend Dr Barry Morgan, who's been incredibly vocal about how this country should be doing more to take in refugees. One of Welby's finest there, right at the heart of our judiciary, is he? There are serious questions about bias right at the heart of our judiciary, and they need to be answered. But let's get the thoughts now of my top panel. I have Star Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. I do have Tory peer Lord Bailey. And, of course, the former Labour advisor Matthew Larser. Alison, I'll start with you. Serious questions need to be answered here, don't they?
Oh, well, absolutely. It's a really shocking tale. Independence, impartiality, integrity, the three I's, they are the cornerstone of the judiciary. We are not a banana republic where some judge could just pick and choose according to how much he likes the defendant. And as you picked up in your monologue, Patrick, I mean, this guy, Judge Ikram, he's got a track record of coming down hard on people. You've talked about James Watts, but there's another example of policemen who were sharing unpleasant jokes about Meghan Markle in a WhatsApp group. So private communications, which he imposes custodial sentences for. But these three women walking down major London streets 7 days after those paragliders came into the desert with those wonderful young people, massacred, raped, everything done to them at that peace festival. And this guy is saying that the fact that they had those emblems, which they were trying to pass off as freedom emblems, oh, please. And he said, yes, obviously that wasn't true, but never mind, you know, the emotions were running high at the time. Yeah. Any crime could be said to be emotions running at a time. This man, this judge needs to be called to account for this. It's really worrying, Patrick, because we've seen this week 147% rise in anti-Semitic crimes. What's a Jewish person going to think being called up before him in a court?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we are going to be focusing in on that a little bit later on as well. Sean, I mean, when I had a little look through some of the other people on this list of, you know, the top judiciary and the people who decide who can become judges, etc., you know, there's quite a lot of pro-immigration stuff there. There's a lot of people who appear to be, you know, pretty embedded in the old environment lobby. And now we've got this guy who's got serious questions to answer about, you know, his political views when it comes to Israel and whether or not they're a terrorist state. Do you think we need some kind of investigation here?
Look, there's two things to be said. Firstly, there's the personal. If I was one of the officers who's convicted and treated in this way, if at all possible, I'd now be thinking about an appeal. Because it's clear you could go back and say, this person has convicted me because of their political beliefs, because when given an opportunity to deal with someone else in the same way, they simply didn't. Now, of course, they'll argue to and fro, and another lawyer will get rich from it, but it is something I think people will do. But the deeper thing is this undermines the entire system. It is clear that people, judges here, are acting on their political beliefs. I sit in the Lords, and the Lords we're now debating the Rwanda bill, and one of the biggest defences is everybody saying, you know, the independence of the judiciary, the clear thinking of the judiciary, how grown up and level-headed they are, but the judiciary may be riddled with people like this. So when you ask for an inquiry, I would say yes, because it would be important to give the public some confidence in the judiciary, because if we don't have any confidence in the law, then we're done. And I'll finish by saying this. The events of the past 3 or 4 years have shown that the law is now political. Somebody needs to do something about
that. And that's the point, isn't it? By the way, the Lords is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to bias as well. I would love to do a roundup of the amount of people in the House.
At least we're politicians. Yeah, fine. You look a politician in the face knowing they have some bias. Exactly. When you talk about the law, that's not what you expect.
No, exactly that. But then you look at the Lords who are then discussing the Rwanda plan, you think, hang on a minute, how many of you work for refugees charities on the side? How many of you got skin on the game there? And it's actually quite a few. Matthew, the law has become political and they lean to the left.
Well, independence of the judiciary is one of our key values of our national life. I mean, I remember the Daily Mail headline, "Enemies of the People," during the Brexit row when it was about proroguing Parliament. I thought that was the most disgraceful thing. It really frightened me, actually, that we were crossing over into abusing our judges. But independence of the judiciary goes two ways. It means that our judges need to be steadfastly independent themselves. And I think, you know, this is a very, very worrying example. And the fact that he liked it and then is claiming... I mean, look, I've had a whole week talking about people trying to say, oh, I didn't really know what it was in a different context about things that they shouldn't have said. You know, this is one to be one of our most senior judges. He knows what he was doing, and he needs to stand up and face the consequences, because independence is vital, but it's got to be on both sides.
I suppose, Alison, and look, obviously, we are just saying that this poses serious questions. Everybody involved in all of this would no doubt deny any wrongdoing, either are denying any wrongdoing, or presumably would welcome some kind of inquiry. That would be nice, wouldn't it? However, Alison, it does raise a serious question about whether or not different aspects of our society have been infiltrated by people with certain political views. They are on various different appointment committees now, and that, frankly, is what we're getting.
Yes, and we're seeing, as Sean said, we're seeing a lot of pro-immigration thing. We've talked before, haven't we, about the Church of England, which is now riddled with pro-asylum seeker sentiment, to the point where we're hearing about an unholy, literally unholy alliance between the Church of England and immigration lawyers who are coming up with cover stories for asylum seekers.
The irony there to allow Muslims into the country, which is ridiculous.
To allow Muslims into the country.
Yeah.
And it's extremely worrying, running alongside this rampant anti-Semitism within institutions and finding it. I mean, imagine, we all find this appalling. Imagine a Jewish person hearing about this judge. And as Matthew said, it's the absolute cornerstone of our system.
The other piece as well is the civil service is facing challenges. You've had ministers who've had to face down activism within the civil service. And as I remember a civil servant saying to me, we are not left or we are not right, we are neutral. But if you see the activities of civil service now, you could challenge that. For instance, civil servants getting in known political activists, Stonewall, for instance, to write policy. And I think somebody in senior positions needs to say enough is enough, because a lot of people are beginning to distrust the system.
Can we just say, Sean and I were talking about this, the Home Office, International Hijab Day.
Yeah.
Sorry, what country are we in, Patrick? You know, lovely if you want to wear a different head covering, no issue with that. Actual paid-for civil servants running an Islamic society within the Home Office, celebrating a religious head covering, which many women around the world are dying to be free of. I mean, this is really outrageous.
And apparently the other aspect of that story which you raised there was that apparently there was no internal communication sent around to staff about Abdul Azidi. All got very quiet about Abdul, hasn't it? Where's Abdul? Is he in the Thames or not? But they're talking about no internal communication about that. The internal communication they got was about World Hijab Day, which is remarkable. Matthew, would it be unfair or unreasonable to make every single judge answer honestly a pamphlet on where they are on key political issues? And like with a football referee, then they don't referee their own team.
Well, no, I don't think we can I don't want to get into that, because I think we'd end up with an American-style judiciary with political appointments, which we've seen mean that people in America can claim...
Are we not there already, though? This is the argument.
I don't think we are, but I think this is a slippery slope, and I think it needs to be nipped in the bud straight away, and hopefully this case will be a reminder to their learned judges that they need to be very careful what they like, and they need to be very careful, crucially, about applying the law equally, whatever it is.
The law is always about interpretation. If enough people think the same way, they'll interpret the same way, which means currently, if it feels like, if you're left-leaning, if you do something that the left appreciate, then you'll get away with it.
I mean, historically, people would have argued the judiciary was a big pillar of small C conservatism. You talk to people, absolutely. Historically, the left have been, protesting about judges, being hard on trade unionists. Think about the miners' strike, 40th anniversary of it this week. But I think it has changed.
The fact that it's changed doesn't make it any better. If you're a trade unionist, you should know that you get treated the same as if you're...
It needs to be fair, absolutely, fairness.
We'll draw a line under that for now. Now, Mr Rick Cram has since responded via the courts and tribunal judiciary press, saying it was a genuine mistake and he did not know he had liked the post. And a CPS spokesperson told us, we are carefully considering any future actions in relation to this case. So that is whether or not there's going to be a review of that sentencing, etc. Now, look, there is still plenty of time for you to grab your chance to win £18,000 in cash in our Great British Giveaway. Here's all the details you need to enter.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for?
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Still to come, a horrifying report reveals 45 out of the 48 incidents of anti-Jewish hate connected to political parties or their supporters were linked to Labour. So is Keir Starmer's party still gripped by anti-Semitism? But first, it's our head-to-head. Should we block asylum seekers from working in Britain to make the UK less attractive? This was suggested by former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who was on this show yesterday. Look, still loads to go at, and a big exclusive for you as well on the Rochdale grooming gangs. Stay tuned.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News. Now, coming up, the anti-Semitism row that is ravaging the Labour Party. But first, it's time to go head-to-head. So, former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who was on this show yesterday, has slammed the UK asylum system, saying that we should block asylum seekers from working to make the UK a less attractive destination. Sounds like common sense, if you ask me. Speaking after a fact-finding mission to the border in southern Texas, which is being ravaged by illegal immigration as well, Jenrick warned the global asylum system has become a back door to the labour market for economic migrants who are in search of better prospects, but not in fear of their life. Currently, asylum seekers in Britain can work in shortage occupation areas, so care or agriculture, 12 months after their arrival. But now, it looks like we're going backwards, doesn't it? They could soon drop that to 6 months, as opposed to, oh, I don't know, blocking them forever. Jenrick, however, argues this time period should be increased instead. So tonight I am asking, look, should we block asylum seekers from working to make the UK less attractive? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBNews. I'll bring you the results of our poll very shortly. But first, here to go head-to-head is the former UKIP leader, Henry Bolton, and we've got activist Femi Nylander. Henry, why are we making Britain more attractive with this? Should we not just be blocking them from working to, frankly, deter them from coming?
Yes, I think we should, Patrick. Look, there's a number of things here. First of all, you know, people will say, well, it's costing us money to accommodate these people. We're paying them benefits and so on. But there's various costs involved in them staying.
Oh, I think we might have lost Henry there. All right, Femi, I'll throw it over to you, Femi. Look, Femi, these people are not going to end up being a net benefit no matter what we do, frankly. So we are going to end up having to house them somewhere or whatever. And we've had the recession numbers out today, Femi, and they show that actually we are GDP per capita worse off and are worse off for the longest, most consistent period that we have been since 1955. So what on earth can the argument be for allowing asylum seekers to work?
Well, I mean, obviously EU citizens are not asylum seekers, but we saw that Britain floundered, and part of the reason we're in a recession is because of this xenophobia, which led us to leave the European Union, despite the fact that migrants from the EU who are poorer than British people because of the way the EU is structured.
Why is Germany in recession,
Just let me get to the point, rather than going off on a tangent. The point being, of course, that British people don't want to do the jobs at the bottom of British society. They don't want to be fruit pickers. They don't really want to be, a lot of them don't really want to do cleaning and stuff like that. And you have a lot of migrant labour in the UK economy, which underpins the UK economy and it helps it function.
But that's legal, so what about asylum seekers?
But okay, asylum seekers. So on the one hand, you want to tell me asylum seekers are criminals, asylum seekers are awful people, they this, that, the rest. On the other hand, you want to say you want to force them into criminality by preventing them from being able to get any type of work. Asylum seekers are people who are seeking asylum because of the fact, usually, that they're coming from a position of war or a position of serious hardship. They're coming from France. Okay, so they've come to Europe from France. Okay, so what you're saying is that every single asylum seeker that comes to the EU should just stay in Italy or Greece, because that's where they land. That Italy and Greece should bear the whole burden of this, and that England should have no one.
I'm saying that we should deport a lot of them, actually.
You're saying we should deport a lot of them because you're a heartless person, Patrick, because you don't have any shared notion of humanity, because you don't believe that human beings who are fleeing war.
I do, Femi, and I will come back to you. But what I do believe is when I talk to former immigration ministers or people who are currently in government who tell me that we've got people who are members of ISIS and fanatics and people who are rapists and murderers
people who are members of the IDF
as well,
who have been murdering and raping Palestinian people.
I'll lob it back over to you now. You know, look, is there a case, for letting asylum seekers work. Femi's saying it's a humane thing to do. Maybe it is.
If the aim is to reduce the flow across the channel, then absolutely not. Of course, it is an incentive. It's one of a number of incentives for them to come over to the UK. Around about 1 in 11 Albanians, so they're not coming now, came to this country. Femi's just been talking about them fleeing war and so on. There was no war in Albania. This has been covered many times. It's part of NATO. It's an accession country to the European Union. It's in the Council of Europe, etc., etc. There is no war in Albania. There hasn't been for over 20 years. These people are coming here because there is an economic benefit in doing so. They were coming across the channel. They were claiming asylum. They were working, or some of them were allowed to work. And what happens then is that they send what's called remittances back to their home country. The UK, the last figures I've seen, I think they were 2018, sent £8 billion abroad in remittances. These are not included in the costs associated with dealing with asylum seekers. If we want to keep that money in the economy, we give the money to British jobs. And what Femi's saying about British workers not wanting those jobs is absolute rubbish. OK, my partner works as a support worker. OK, there are plenty of people who want to do the job, but they can't get the support to do it. And these asylum seekers and others, up until very recently, have been undercutting the British market because in those shortage jobs, then the employer can pay 80% of what they pay.
OK, I'm going to go back to Femi. Look, Femi, do you not think that it would make Britain a less desirable place to come for people coming across the Channel and other ways into Britain as well if they knew that when they got here they wouldn't be able to work until their claim had been processed? Yes or no?
Well, just quickly, I mean, Britain has people coming back from just fighting in an army that's been tried for genocide. So I don't think saying that ISIS people are coming. We're happy to have murderers coming back to our shores.
Let's drill down on that then, Femi.
But moving on.
Are you equating, say, ISIS fighters and jihadis with the people who've gone to fight for the IDF?
I'm saying the IDF is an army which is currently under trial at the ICJ for genocide, and our people who are coming back to Britain have been working in that army. It's an army which has killed 30,000
British citizens who have gone to fight for the Israeli force against Hamas, and you are equating them,
I'm making a clear parallel. But the point is, of course, that you're driving to the key point. When you talk about economic migrants, what we have to say is, why are there economic migrants? Why are people trying to migrate from some of the poorest places in the world, some of the richest places in the world? Because we have huge economic inequality across the world.
Why
do we have huge economic equality across the world? This is where we get into them, Femi, isn't it? It's not really about fairness, is it, here? It's not really about any of that. It's about creating a global system, isn't it, in which we divvy up all of our wealth around the world. No, it's about having a more equitable world where certain countries, like Britain, like France, like the US, don't exploit the developing world. Don't set up sweatshops in Bangladesh. Don't have mining companies in Africa.
So we have very quickly, as very often happens, right, we have very quickly gone from would it or would it not be a deterrent for people coming across the Channel if we told them they couldn't work, to we need to stop sweatshops in Bangladesh, we need to change a completely different worldview, and
people don't want to leave their homes, Patrick. People don't want to leave their homes. If we had a more equitable world and we weren't exploiting people in poor countries, they would stay at home. If we weren't starting wars, Palestinian refugees would. Palestinian refugees in 10 years' time, there's going to be a load of Palestinian refugees
people are leaving purely for economic reasons, and then also completely miss out the fact that a lot of the time they are leaving countries led by rabid Islamists.
When all these Palestinians are forced into the desert, you don't think they're going to become refugees? You don't think they're going to come try? Well, we're supporting.
Do you not seriously think, Femi, that the honest answer to this, Femi, the honest answer to this is that people in a lot of these countries actually end up electing people who turn out to be complete and utter lunatics.
You don't think some of them are going to come and try to Europe? You think if we left Gaza as it was and didn't blow it to pieces, they wouldn't stay at home? No, we're creating refugees, and we did it in Libya. We did it in Iraq.
Okay, right, Femi, I'm going to park that one there.
Patrick, and you know we do. You know we do.
There's quite a lot to come back to there, Henry. I'm going to drag it back to the original topic of discussion here, which is that, look, you know, if we did have asylum seekers that were allowed to work after 6 months here, then I suppose they would be paying some form of tax, wouldn't they? Would that not mean that we could then, you know, earn a bit of money from them, as it were?
Yeah, but then when you look at the remittances that are sent abroad, then actually, and the fact that actually they would probably be in the lower bracket of wages, we're not making very much money out of them. And if you look at all of the data, it says that immigrants from countries such as Nigeria, such as Afghanistan, such as Syria and so on, are actually a net cost. Even when they are working in the UK and across Europe, they are a net cost to the economies, not a net gain, if you like. But the other thing to bear in mind here, and because I think it is relevant, because if somebody comes over and they start a job, then as I said at the beginning, I was trying to say at the beginning when I think I lost the network, they are actually gaining more traction in terms of getting their asylum claim and their right to remain in the UK bedded in, because they've got a settled life, they've got an income and so on. But bear in mind that a lot of this time we still don't know who these people are. And there is a connection with what Femi's saying. You know, Femi probably is against us bombing the Houthis. Well, right, they're fine, but the Houthis are the reason that there is so much poverty and suffering in Yemen, and why there's a problem.
It's not Saudi Arabia.
So
not Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen with British bombs for the past 10 years?
All right. And the Houthis started a civil war in 2014 against the legitimate government of Yemen. They are the reason. That civil war initiated by the Houthis is the reason
suffering
why
in Yemen
people are suffering.
Comes from British bombs being dropped by the Saudi Arabia.
Let's park it there, because it is not a discussion about Yemen and Saudi Arabia, etc., to be fair, but I suppose inevitably we're going to end up somewhere there, weren't we? Chaps, thank you very, very much, both of you. Look, who do you agree with? Should we block asylum seekers from working in the UK to make us less attractive as a destination? Wilson says they shouldn't be allowed to work, they shouldn't be receiving benefits or free healthcare, especially when they're going straight to the front of the queue. David says if we're letting them in, they should be encouraged to work, but we need to let a lot less in. Becky says working legally should be encouraged. It's fraud and false benefit claims which are the problem. Your verdict is in. 92% of you agree that we should block asylum seekers from working to make the UK less attractive. 8% of you say we shouldn't. Coming up, has the old wives' tale that immigration boosts the economy now been shattered? Because hundreds of thousands have arrived in Britain over recent years, but we've still plunged into a recession. The key figures are GDP per capita. We are not now better off. But next, a new poll reveals that just 3% of voters think Keir Starmer has successfully tackled anti-Semitism in his party. So is Labour still gripped by anti-Jewish hate? I'll get stuck into that. That's next with me, Patrick Christys, only on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Loads for you. The government is using mass migration to hide how poor our country has become. I also have a big exclusive for you on the Rochdale grooming gangs, which you will not want to miss. But first, Labour's anti-Semitism crisis spiralled even further today. An astonishing new poll revealing that just 3% of voters think Keir Starmer has successfully tackled anti-Semitism in his party. Now, it comes just hours after Rochdale by-election candidate Azir Ali vowed to, get a load of this, oh, there he is, teach Starmer a lesson in a new campaign poster after the Labour leader dumped him over anti-Semitic comments he allegedly made. I'm sorry, but that apology was hardly genuine, was it, when he said, I'm very sorry about saying all that stuff. I didn't really mean it. Wallop, there he goes. And to add Starmer's woes, London Mayor Sadiq Khan let the cat out of the bag with this excruciating gaffe earlier.
Sort of language isn't acceptable, and it certainly shouldn't be acceptable in a party like mine that is proud to be both anti-racist but also anti-Semitic.
And we'll come back to some of those...
beg your pardon, tackling anti-Semitism.
Yeah, OK. I think, you know, genuine mistake there by Sadiq, but still, quite funny nonetheless. I think Keir Starmer would disagree with his colleague on that point there. Here's what he had to say afterwards, OK? So this is after withdrawing support for Ali 2 days ago.
It is virtually unprecedented to withdraw support for a candidate in the way that I withdrew support for this candidate yesterday. That's what a changed Labour Party is all about.
Oh, change Labour, change Labour. Oh, well, a new report has revealed that 45 out of the 48 anti-Semitic incidents connected to political parties were linked to Labour last year. Is the party still gripped by anti-Semitism? I'm joined now by the Executive Director of the Israel Advocacy Movement. It's Joseph Cohen. Joseph, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Does Labour have an anti-Semitism problem?
In a word, yes. I mean, it's clear from the report you just cited, 94% of the incidents connected to a political party were connected to Labour. That's staggering when you look at clearly there's 2 major parties and a number of smaller parties within the United Kingdom, and 94% of the incidents were connected to one. Sadly, the legacy of Corbyn and the anti-Semitism scandal, where Labour were the first political party to be found guilty of breaching the Equality Act of 2010. We are in a situation now today, years later under Starmer, where that legacy of Corbyn is still here and anti-Semitism is still rife within the party, unfortunately.
Do you think there is a link in some way between people on the left and socialism and anti-Semitism?
So there's a misconception by many that you can't be on the left and anti-Semitic. The founder of communism, Karl Marx, wrote a paper on the Jewish question where he said the Jewish God was that religion was usury and their God was money. Anti-Semitism has been on the left since its inception. It's also been on the right. Unfortunately, it's a poison which has affected many different ideologies and many communities, but it's been there from the beginning and it's still present today in the United Kingdom and over 100 years later.
I think there's an uncomfortable truth to be had here, which is we appear to be importing rather a lot of anti-Semites.
Unfortunately, many politicians feel that they have to bend to the whims of those anti-Semites and either turn a blind eye to anti-Semitism or get fully behind it and endorse or perpetrate anti-Semitic tropes.
What do we do about this? What do we do about it? Because we are seeing some astonishing things in the run-up to the next general election. OK, we're seeing the muslimvote.co.uk being set up. We've been covering that rather a lot on this show. We're seeing a whole host of people now standing against Labour on a quotes-unquote pro-Palestine ticket. This issue is not going away. I'm not saying that everybody there at the muslimvote.co.uk or every single person who's pro-Palestine is anti-Semitic. I'm not trying to say that. But certainly I worry now that the cat is out of the bag and we're going to end up seeing more and more of this and those people having much more of a sway in British politics, not just at this election, but in the decades to come.
So I think the first thing to remember is that Britain is an incredibly tolerant and welcoming society. My family fled here as refugees, as Jewish refugees from massacres in Europe. We were given a place of refuge here and welcomed into this country. And I felt British as can be. I was raised in a working class community in the north of England. I played in a colliery band and I didn't really experience anti-Semitism until recent years. And it soared. We are experiencing the worst wave of anti-Semitism in 40 years. Now, that seems quite abstract. What does that mean? Well, my local supermarket, just 5 minutes away from my house, a couple of weeks ago, someone walked in with a knife, an Islamist, an extremist, and tried to stab Jews. It barely made the news. It barely made the news. And so we're in a situation where we desperately need to de-radicalize and educate others on what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is misunderstood by most that hold those views.
OK, all right. Just to clarify something, which I'm sure you will appreciate, it's an active case, the one that you've just said there, so everything there is allegedly, but that's all right. Look, in terms of what happens now for people on the streets, are you seeing things like no-go zones? So, you know, like marches at the weekends? And, I mean, I would hate to be a Jewish person walking through some of those marches.
So Jews stay away from the marches. I've had friends of mine tell me their children were in floods of tears, terrified, cowering in cafes as the marches walked past. One of the scariest things is actually, as I didn't grow up in the Jewish community, I became religious later in life, although I'm from a Jewish background. I went to a normal English school. I came to London. The schools look like prison. The Jewish schools look like prison. They have security, cameras, fences everywhere. And Jewish parents kept their children away from schools on certain days. Jewish schools were closed down on certain days out of fear of attacks. This is a very, very scary situation for the Jewish community to find themselves.
And you don't believe Keir Starmer when he says it's a changed Labour Party, that it's all different now, that he's taken swift and decisive action? Because that is what he says, and he's sticking to that.
So I'll be honest, I think Keir Starmer understands what anti-Semitism is, and I think he's passionate about combating it. I think his own family, I believe he's got a Jewish family, have been the victims of anti-Semitism. But the problem is so endemic. The poison has spread so far that he's got a real struggle on his hands.
All right. Look, thank you very, very much, Joseph. I hope to chat to you again soon. And obviously, I hope things improve as well. As Joseph Cohen there, who is the Executive Director of the Israel Advocacy Movement. Look, here are all the candidates standing in this Rochdale by-election. You've got Azar Ali, Labour Party, Mark Coleman, Independent, Simon Danchuk, Reform UK, Ian Donaldson, Liberal Democrat, Paul Ellison, Conservative, George Galloway, Workers' Party of Britain, Michael Howarth, Independent, William Howarth, Independent, Guy Otten, Green Party, Raving Rodent Subordinate, Official Monster Raving Loony Party, and David Tully, Independent. Now, coming up at 10 p.m, not long now, Polls closed. They slammed shut in those by-elections in Wellingborough and in Kingswood. We will cross live to the scene of both those votes. We're going to get instant analysis before speaking directly with the runners and the riders of the main parties. We really do mean it when we say we are Britain's election channel here on GB News. But next, is the government using mass migration to hide how poor we've actually become? Are we now worse off per capita? Well, yes, we are. Hundreds of thousands have come to Britain in recent years, but we're still in recession. David Campbell-Bannerman breaks it all down next. Are we being lied to about a giant immigration Ponzi scheme? Oh, yes. And I've also got that big exclusive for you about the Rochdale grooming gangs. Don't miss that.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The polls are minutes away from closing in Kingswood and Wellingborough by-elections. We will be live on the ground in just a few ticks for you. We really are Britain's election channel, so make sure that you keep it GB News. But first, it was only a few weeks ago that a private Treasury document, get a load of this, from 2022 was leaked to The Telegraph. Now, they advised Rishi Sunak that cutting taxes would have little impact on growing the economy. He should instead focus on boosting immigration. OK? But despite a sharp rise in net migration to Britain, 745,000 in 2022, 672,000 in the 12 months to June last year. It was revealed today that the economy declined by a worse-than-expected 0.3% in the last quarter of 2023. Well, now, this is the important bit. GDP per head, OK, so how we're all doing individually, was equally as torrid as just 0.7%. In fact, it's been declining now for the longest period of time since records first began in 1955. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, who's due to deliver a pre-election budget within weeks, insisted that while times are tough, the country is already turning a corner.
Underlying picture here is an economy that is more resilient than most people predicted. Inflation is coming down, real wages have been going up now for 6 months. And if we stick to our guns, independent forecasters say that by the early summer we could start to see interest rates falling.
Former Conservative Party MEP David Campbell-Bannerman joins me now. We have been lied to about mass migration. It's making us poorer, not richer, no?
Well, I think it's a matter of statistics as ever, Patrick, because as John Longworth, who is British Chamber of Commerce head, pointed out today, that we are the 6th largest economy in the world, which is good. But when you look at GDP per head, we're at the 27th largest in the world, which is far less impressive. And you don't hear that statistic very much. And I think that is a real cause for concern, as you rightly point out.
You're right. It's all about a paradigm shift. If we decided to try to care more as a country about how we were ranking GDP per capita, as opposed to where we were just GDP, we would actually probably reduce net migration. Certainly we'd do more to cut back on asylum seekers, etc., wouldn't we? And we would just focus more on ourselves.
I mean, there are certain types of immigration, you know, top businessmen and women coming into the country as sports people. You obviously do want them to come in. But, you know, if we have the city the size of Leeds, I was watching a programme earlier, coming in every year, and they're not in that category, you know, but they are contributing. Many, I wouldn't say they're not. But, you know, we don't have anywhere to put them. We have a housing crisis. And immigration is growing. The Migration Watch used to say it's about 60% of future 30-year housing building plans is down to immigrants coming in. I think it's going up to about 90% now. So it's creating major problems and making us all poorer.
But the Treasury and people around that cabinet table, etc., are just so tunnel visioned when it comes to this stuff. The only way... Philip Hammond, by the way, was guilty of this massively as well when he was Chancellor. The only way they can see us doing all right on a spreadsheet is to keep pumping us full of hundreds of thousands of people a year, isn't it? And we need to have someone with a bit of different thinking in there, surely.
I mean, it's stunning that they regard this, you know, net migration as a major economic benefit, and it's helped the figures, apparently, you know, kept growth out of recession till now. But what we really do need is investment, private and public, that's come out today. And Liz Truss was very right on growth, you know, actually going for growth. You know, maybe she went too far, too fast at the time, But, you know, the point is she did have the right point. We need the growth, and that's going to be driven by lower taxation and more incentives for businessmen. And putting up corporation tax from 19 to 25% does not help that aim. So I think we've actually created the recession through our policies, to be honest.
I've just got here, just again to emphasise this, so GDP per person dropped every quarter of 2023. It hasn't grown since Q1 of 2022. That's 7 quarters, which is the longest unbroken run without per capita GDP growth since records began in 1955. So surely now, David, this giant mass migration Ponzi scheme that we've been forced to live in can just be finished.
I think it is that, and it is startling how the Treasury and the OBR and everyone use these figures. I mean, I take the analogy of a chocolate machine. You know, if you have the wrong material, you put, you know, mud in the chocolate machine, you don't get chocolate out. And if you have the wrong kind of assumptions going into a model like this, then you get the wrong assumptions coming out of it, that, you know, migration is good when it isn't in many ways. And so you've got to look at the whole model and rework it. That's the lesson of today.
Well, you know, how long do people want to have to wait to see a GP? How difficult does it have to be to get your children in schools? How difficult does it have to be to try and find somewhere to live? How tough does it have to be, you know, just to find a job anywhere before people start to think, well, hang on a minute, actually, is massive record levels of net migration actually part of the blame? And they'll go, oh, well, we accepted 100,000 people from Hong Kong, didn't we? Yeah, most of those people will be highly skilled. A lot of those people will have just assimilated straight away into British society and quite possibly will be a net benefit, as opposed to, I don't know, some other areas of the world that we're accepting in. But, David, we're going to have to leave it there. David Campbell-Bannerman, fantastic. I'll talk to you again very soon, my good man. That is former Tory MEP, David Campbell-Bannerman. Coming up, OK, in the next hour, I deliver a bombshell exclusive about grooming gang paedophiles fighting deportation back to Pakistan and absolutely rinsing the taxpayer in the process. We're the only ones with this story. This is the only place you will get it, so make sure that you stay tuned. Why can't we just kick them out? But there we go. Anyway, now we're going to be going to the polls in the by-elections. Yes, that's right, in Wellingborough and Kingswood. They are minutes away from closing. We will cross live to the scene of both of those votes to get instant analysis before speaking directly with the runners and the riders of the main parties. We are Britain's election channel. It is Patrick Christys tonight, and we're on GB News.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Friday's going to be a much drier and brighter day for many of us, but we have still got some heavy rain to come through the rest of the evening. That's as a result of this weather front that's slowly pushing eastwards across the country through the rest of the day and through tonight. So there's still some heavy rain to come across parts of the southwest. That'll push into the Midlands later on this evening and then into the southeast, but rain should be fairly limited by the time it arrives into the southeast. Behind it, it should turn much clearer as well. So some clear spells to come tonight, but still got very mild air. So it will be another very mild night tonight, frost-free across the country by tomorrow morning. There'll also be some early sunshine, particularly across eastern areas of Scotland, as well as central areas of England too tomorrow morning. And we'll see a good deal of sunshine through the day. Some thicker cloud across parts of northwestern England, North Wales, that could be thick enough to bring some drizzly rain. But in any of the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Highs of 13 or 14 degrees in the south or 12 degrees further north. A bright start to Saturday across eastern areas, but cloud will thicken through the day as this weather front approaches. So some drizzly rain in the west through the morning and then a heavy spell of rain to come through the evening across western areas and perhaps on Sunday morning in the east. But once that clears on Sunday, it should be a fairly dry and bright day for many of us, and it will be staying mild all through the weekend. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in the Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, polls have just slammed shut in two pivotal by-elections. We are on the scene now of these two constituencies as those votes are counted, and the starting gun has been fired on a massive year in British politics. That's where we are, OK? The two counts. This is where the magic is going to be happening tonight. We are Britain's election channel, OK? Will Reform's Ben Habib win in Wellingborough? He joins me live. There's been a heck of a lot of chat about Ben Habib in the run-up to this. He's live. And can Labour recover from anti-Semitism scandals and claims as well? Well, Shadow Cabinet Minister Jonathan Reynolds, he's also going to be joining me live. Also a big exclusive now, a big exclusive on the despicable grooming gangs fighting to avoid deportation. Crashing through tomorrow's front page is our Star Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. We've got Lord Sean Bailey and ex-Labour advisor Matthew Larser. And I will reveal what's happening here. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Well, it's official. The starting gun has now been fired on Britain's bumper political year. Live reaction coming next.
Good evening. Well, as you've been hearing in the last few minutes, by-election voting booths have closed in Wellingborough in Northamptonshire and Kingswood in South Gloucestershire. Polling station staff will soon be emptying out the ballot boxes and counting the votes. Wellingborough expected to declare at around 4 a.m, with Kingswood looking to give their result any time up to 6 a.m. GB News is up all night tonight, following those events for you and bringing you those live declarations together with expert analysis from midnight right through till breakfast. Well, in other news today, the Chancellor says there is light at the end of the tunnel if the government sticks to its economic plan, despite the UK entering into recession. Official figures showing the economy shrank by 0.3% at the end of 2023, after similar contractions in the previous 3 months. It's the first time the UK's GDP has dropped since the first half of 2020, after the first COVID lockdown. Labour says the government is completely out of touch with people's reality. In other news today, a Romanian people smuggler has been jailed for attempting to hide 7 migrants in the overhead compartment of a motorhome and then trying to get them into the UK. The group were discovered by Border Force officials at Harwich International Port in Essex last December. 2 of the migrants claimed asylum. 5, though, were deemed illegal and sent back to the Netherlands. Minister for Illegal Migration Michael Tomlinson says that those putting lives at risk will face the full weight of the law. A Just Stop oil activist disrupted flights for more than 4,000 travellers after scaling a motorway gantry near Heathrow, protesting about global warming. 22-year-old Cambridge University student Cressida Gethin says she wanted to interrupt business as usual and draw attention to what she called the dire temperatures in the UK. Broadcaster and environmentalist Chris Packham was one of the drivers who are held up in traffic. He supported her in court, saying he came to sympathise with her actions. Her trial for causing public nuisance continues. The holiday park operator Pontins has apologised for engaging in what the European Court of Human Rights described as shocking discrimination towards Irish travellers. It comes after a whistleblower revealed a list of banned Irish surnames labelled as undesirable guests. Pontins staff were instructed to decline bookings based on the names and identified travellers by listening out for Irish accents. The ACHR has now served an unlawful act notice requiring Pontins to engage with the Gypsy and traveller community and develop an action plan addressing discrimination. And the first ever commercial US lunar lander mission is heading for the moon.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff.
The spacecraft left the launch pad on Florida's Atlantic coast earlier on today, blasting into the night sky. It's hoped the lander, nicknamed Odysseus, will touch down near the moon's south pole sometime next week. For the very latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, OK, well, the polls have now slammed shut and the starting gun has been fired on a political year that will set the future of the UK. What happens in Kingswood and Wellingborough matters for the whole of Britain as the general election looms large. So voters in the constituencies had until 10 p.m. to decide who they wanted to be their MP, following the departures of Chris Skidmore and Peter Bone, respectively. Now, Kingswood is a town situated in South Gloucestershire. Meanwhile, Wellingborough is located in the county of Northamptonshire in the East Midlands. So that's where we're dealing with here, OK? Let's take a little look, shall we, at how they voted back in 2019. Now, in Kingswood, Chris Skidmore had been successful at the past 4 general elections. He increased his vote share on each occasion, and it was up 56% in 2019. Before 2010, Labour had won the seat at every general election since 1992. So to win, Labour need a swing in the share of the vote of 11.4 percentage points, so quite a big swing there. In Wellingborough, former Conservative MP Peter Bone won at every general election from 2005 to 2019. He increased the Tory share of the vote by a staggering 62% in 2019. Labour came second in 4 of the 5 contests, including in 2019 with candidate Andrea Watts. However, the exception was in 2015 when UKIP was the runner-up. The swing needed by Labour to win this seat, though, is larger than in Kingswood. It's 17.9 percentage points. In other words, it's the equivalent of 18 out of every 100 people who voted Tory in 2019 switching sides. Could happen. It could. So, swings of 11.4% in Kingswood and 17.9% in Wellingborough required by Labour. But victory in Wellingborough would be the 7th largest swing from Conservatives to Labour since 1945. Labour can be encouraged, though, that 3 of the top 6 came in 2023. So they've got form, including the 23.9% swing in Tamworth back in October. Defeats for the Tories tonight would be a bitter blow for Rishi Sunak. It would take by-election defeats up to 10 in this Parliament. It started so well for the Conservatives in 2021 after the party gained Hartlepool from Labour. But back-to-back defeats to the Lib Dems in the assumed safe seats of Chesham and Amersham and in North Shropshire, following the resignation of Owen Paterson, saw the tide turn on the Tories. They have since lost Wakefield, Selby and Ainsty, Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth to the Labour Party, and a further 2 seats to the Lib Dems. With the latest polls showing Tory big hitters Jacob Rees-Mogg, Jeremy Hunt and other cabinet ministers would actually lose their seats if the general election was held tomorrow, will defeat in Kingswood and Wellingborough see letters of no confidence stacking up now, of course, in Rishi Sunak? What will it mean for the public, though, if they do go to Labour? Will they have backed Keir Starmer despite a disastrous handling of anti-Semitism allegations in recent days? Will reform be rampant or a damp squib? Find out right here on GB News. We are Britain's election channel, but we can cross live now to both of the constituencies for you there. And what you can see as well is an early indication of how the people of Wellingborough and Kingswood have voted. I will start with GB News' national reporter, Theo Chakomba, over there at the count in Kingswood. Theo, what have been the big issues for you there in that particular area?
Yes, well, cost of living is one of those things which has been cited by those who live in the Kingswood area. Our colleague Jeff Moody has been out gauging the mood. Now, of course, since 1974, the constituency of Kingswood has been in place, but later this year it will no longer be there. But people are concerned about their towns, investment in the city centre, cost of living, energy bills, mortgage payments, and so much more. Of course, those things we've been hearing in the national picture, but for those who are living here, they say they can really feel it. But the stage is set here tonight, and counting is set to begin at around 10:30. We've already seen the postal ballot boxes come into this leisure centre where they are doing the count throughout the night. And of course, the pace will start to pick up as the night goes on. We've already seen a familiar face in here, Chris Bryant, Labour's Chris Bryant, who's here in the building, and of course many others who who work in this area. But what does this mean for constituents? They really want to see whether or not this vote will make a difference, and what will this mean for the Conservatives? Will there be more confidence or less following this by-election result? But of course, the pace will be picking up as the hours come through in the next few hours.
Theo, thank you very much. Great stuff where you are there. Let's cross over now to GB News' East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. Now, Will's in Wellingborough for us, which I think has garnered a lot more headlines, actually, over the course of the run-up to these by-elections. Will, what have been the main issues at play for you there? What's particularly exciting and entertaining about your by-election?
Yes, well, where we are actually, Patrick, is just down the road, about 10-15 minutes, still inside Northamptonshire, but we're inside Kettering. Now, this is the huge leisure complex, and it's simply because of scale that we're simply a little bit further down the road. Now, Wellingborough, though, seems to be suffering from many of the same symptoms that's quite familiar across English towns, and that's particularly deprivation, low skills, low wages, and crime and antisocial behaviour. That's what I've been hearing from the people that live and breathe the town of Wellingborough, as well as the other areas as part of the constituency. Now, this one has attracted a lot of attention, particularly because of the nature of how Peter Bone left the Conservative Party after the investigations of sexual misconduct and bullying found that he had committed those sorts of acts, something that the former MP has denied. Now, another reason why it's attracted a lot of attention is because of the Brexit nature of Wellingborough as a constituency. High Brexit voting area. This could be an opportunity where Reform, who have put up one candidate, Ben Habib, tend to do really well. So we're going to be seeing those boxes come from around 70 different polling stations, and they're going to be coming in the next 10 minutes, Patrick.
Will, thank you very much. Great stuff, both of you. You've got a busy night ahead, so I'll leave you to it, and we'll see you again a little bit later on at GB News. Good luck to you both. That's the mood in the polling stations. But how are the candidates feeling? Standing for Reform UK in Wellingborough is Ben Habib, and I'm very pleased to say he joins me now. Ben, feeling lucky?
Well, it's not a matter of luck, is it? It's a matter of getting the votes on the night, and we're about to find out, Patrick.
All right, so come on. What's the mood? How do you think you've done, if you're being honest? You must have a little bit of an early heads up.
Well, all experienced heads around me tell me that candidates feel more optimistic than they should. So I'm going to caveat everything with that to start with. But the mood on the street's been phenomenal. When I put my hat in the ring, the odds against me winning were 66-1. Yesterday, they were 7-1. So the political shift was with me throughout this campaign. And when I first arrived in Wellingborough, people, I don't think, really knew who I was. But yesterday, and indeed today, going around in our little battle bus, I had people shouting up to me in our top deck, saying, hello, Ben, and I mean, it was a remarkable thing. And we've had lots of hoots of horns, people waving the...
Oh, look, don't worry. We will say hello, Ben again very, very soon, and we don't need a battle bus for that. But that is a really fascinating seat, OK? The Wellingborough by-election is going to have really quite large consequences, potentially anyway, for the future of Rishi Sunak. Now, there was a particular individual, a chap called Will Dry, of course, who many of you might not think is a household name. Indeed, he isn't, but he was top pollster for Rishi Sunak. If that name rings a bell, it's because he quit, OK? He decided to walk away from that job, and he was really saying, banging the drum, he thinks that the Tories are going to get a kicking, OK? Not just here, but at a series of different by-elections. So, if he's right, OK, we will find out right here on GB News in just a few hours' time. But Ben Habib, if he does well, or even comes a very, very strong second, well, let me tell you, that will really, really shake up British politics. I'm joined by my press pack now. I'm going to wander over to them because I've got the wonderful Daily Telegraph star columnist Alison Pearson, I've got Conservative peer Lord Bailey, and I've got former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Alison, how do you see these by-elections going tonight? I think with a specific focus probably on the one that's got more publicity, the Wellingborough one.
Well, the most convincing Conservative I've met recently is Ben Habib, apart from Lord Bailey, of course. I think Ben is a fantastic candidate, and as you say, Patrick, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? Because if he can beat the Tories into third, then all bets are off, really. Kingsdown is a very different constituency. It's part of Bristol, Greater Bristol, more likely to pull in more Lib Dem, although Reform's got a very good candidate there in Rupert Lowe. But I think Ben is a tremendous...
Look, how significant would it be if Ben Habib comes second?
Hugely significant, because they are Reform now. With My Lot, a lot of My Lot Daily Telegraph readers, they were saying before we want the Tories to be destroyed. Now they're saying we're going to give Reform a chance. Okay. And there's a lot of 2019 Tory voters who are switching now to Reform.
OK, now this is why you need to keep it GB News this evening, because we are rocking and rolling between midnight and 6 a.m. to keep you up to date. So, as the results come through, you will get it here from us first on GB News. Sean, how worried are you, as a Conservative, how worried are you by the threat of Reform or, let's be honest, by wipe out from Labour?
There's two things. Governments never win by-elections, but losing 10 it would be a bit of a record. I think the Wellingborough and Ben Habib, the real significance will be about turnout. So if there's a fairly high turnout in the auspice of a by-election where turnout's very low and he does very well, then the Conservatives will really need to worry, because that would suggest it's not only that Conservative voters are not turning out, the ones who are turning out are voting for Reform. And what Reform could do is one of two things. They could get the one or two MPs, which would be massive for them, or they could just weaken the Tory vote even more across the country.
Yeah, OK. Matthew, how ecstatic are you at the possibility of a double Labour victory in the early hours of the morning?
Well, I'm ecstatic at the prospect, but I don't think it's a shoo-in yet. I'm just hearing from Labour sources they're not absolutely convinced that they're going to pull both of them off. I mean, it's been a difficult week for the Labour Party, so they are certainly trying to manage expectations.
You're on your phone there.
Well, yeah, they're just saying that it's certainly not in the bag. I mean, the ballot boxes are being opened now. They do this thing called sampling, where all the parties stand there and go through the look at the initial.
Which one are they more worried about?
I think they're more worried about Wellingborough just because of the size of the majority. I mean, in Kingswood, the Tories have run rather more of a vigorous campaign. Wellingborough's had the issue about it was Peter Bone's partner, the previously disgraced Tory MP. But the Tories have put up a fight in Kingswood, and there's a bit of a divide in Kingswood between the inner city bit, which is Labour, and the villages, which are Tory.
Labour overturned vast majority in mid-beds.
Fine. Sorry to put a pin in this particular grenade, but we've got Ben Habib back for round two. Round two of them, back from the dead. Ben, fantastic. OK, so, look, I don't know if you could hear a bit of that, but apparently Labour sources are saying they're quite nervous about what's going on in Wellingborough. That must be music to your ears.
Well, it's too early to tell, to be honest, but what I can tell you is the mood on the street, I was about to say, the mood on the street is like May 2019 when the Brexit Party won its thumping national election, when we returned more MEPs to the European Parliament than any other party and we decimated the Tory vote. That is the mood on the street, Patrick. Whether that translates into votes for Reform UK tonight to the extent required to win the seat, or to come second, or to just beat our polling, which I think is around 10% at the moment, remains to be determined. But the mood is extraordinary, and the political sands are shifting in our direction. The Conservative, I think Alison was saying that, initially people of our disposition wanted the Conservative Party obliterated because they'd lost completely all aspects of conservatism. But there's something else brewing. There's a desire now to replace the Conservative Party with a genuinely conservative force. And I felt it increasingly through this by-election. So I don't know what the result's going to be, but it's going to be important. And I think and I hope Reform has done incredibly well.
So, look, Ben, what's your plan for this evening, then, now? When are you going to end up turning up at the count, and what are you going to do? And have you written a speech?
I don't need to write a speech. I've got it absolutely in my head. I can't wait. If I turn up in the Commons on Monday morning, it will be dishy, rishy, wishy-washy's worst nightmare. That speech will flow absolutely naturally off my lips. The fact that I'm in politics is a testimony to how awfully The Conservative Party has run this country for 14 years. People like me shouldn't be in politics. We're only in it because the Conservative Party has taken the country to the precipice of disaster. There you go. There's my speech, Patrick. It's already happening.
Well, Ben, you know, you're one of life's great optimists. And you know, you're a regular here. You're a regular here on GB News. I know a lot of our viewers and listeners do care for you. So good luck, and no matter what happens, I hope to see you again soon. Take care. That's Ben Habib there. He's been running for reform in Wellingborough. But here we go. After arguably their worst week under Sir Keir Starmer, just how confident are Labour feeling? I'm delighted to welcome to the show the Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade. It's Jonathan Reynolds. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us. Now, you're talking to us from Glasgow, I believe, ahead of the Scottish Labour Party conference. I'm just wondering how you're feeling. Are you feeling confident ahead of these by-elections, do you think, tonight?
Well, you know, at this stage, no one really knows. No one's really got any information, so we're all guessing a little bit. But look, these are obviously two pretty solid Conservative seats. I mean, very large. Wellingborough's an 18,500 Conservative majority, so they're not places we'd usually be expecting to have a chance in. But we think we've got a chance. We think we've run good campaigns, got good candidates. We're confident that whatever the result, and we might not ultimately do it in seats like these, but we've going to hopefully see this continued journey from 2019 where more and more people in all parts of the country are putting their faith in the Labour Party. So that's hopefully what we'll get in the early hours of the morning. So we're happy with what we've done, but we recognise these are on the outer edge of any kind of Labour expectations.
OK. I understand that running alongside the event that you're at the moment is this business forum, which is a behind-closed-doors event. Surely Labour have had enough of behind-closed-doors events after what's happened in recent weeks. Do you think you can bounce back from some of the things we've seen in Rochdale?
No, look, it's been a difficult week, and frankly, when you get a situation like this, it's never going to be an easy thing to do. But look, we've had to make an unprecedented decision to pull essentially the Labour campaign from a seat which we held, which we would expect usually to hold in these circumstances. But we've had to make the right decision in that, and it is the right decision. So look, it's not been an easy week in that sense. I mean, Rochdale's up the road from where I live in Stalybridge and Hyde. I would obviously want, particularly because someone like Tony Lloyd was a friend of mine, us to be fighting to hold that seat. So we can't do that, but we've had to make the right decision. The news broke at the weekend. We made it on Monday. Can't really do it much faster than that, given the circumstances. But, you know, look, these situations sometimes happen in politics. And ultimately, you know, we've come under a lot of flack for how tightly we have vetted our parliamentary candidates. Everyone who was up to this point saying we were doing that too strongly now says, you know, we should do it even more thoroughly, go even further in future. We'll have to learn that lesson, but we have put a lot into our candidate selection for the general election, and ultimately this is why.
OK, all right. Now, look, Jonathan, as well, it's clear that your party is divided on the issue of a ceasefire in Gaza. The SNP are going to give you a bit of a headache because they are bringing a vote to Westminster on a ceasefire. OK, how are you going to vote in that?
Well, look, we'll have to see what the motion is that the SNP put forward. I think they will try and word that to make it as difficult as possible for Labour. But look, when you say Labour's divided, the position the Labour Party has is that we want the fighting to stop. We want a cessation of violence. We want a serious, sustainable ceasefire. That means both sides. And we want a peace process out of that. And I think that is right. I think people saying that you ignore the fact that hostages are still being held or that you somehow only think there's one side in this. We want both sides to be part of that ceasefire.
I get that, but look, if there's a vote, with absolute respect, if there is a vote put forward by the SNP, which it does sound like it's going to be quite black and white, immediate ceasefire or not, how are you going to vote in that?
Look, I've been around politics too long to ever give a comment on something I haven't seen. So we'll have to see the wording that they put down, but we're confident in what our position is. People know what our position is. We will stick to something which reflects that position. And of course, again, we want to see, everybody wants to see an end to what is an absolutely horrendous situation, but it's doing that in a meaningful way that is the most important thing, and doing it in a way which holds and gives a real chance to come out of this horrendous situation with a proper peace process, and hopefully this situation moved on. I think in the past few years people have paid lip service to things like a two-state solution. It hasn't, to be frank, advanced. We need something meaningful and serious to come out of this, and of course the short-term response to this horrible situation has got to be that cessation of violence on both sides.
All right. Jonathan, can I just say thank you very, very much for joining us tonight, especially for standing outside in what is probably quite cold weather in Glasgow. So thank you very much. Take care, and I'll talk to you again soon. All the best. All right, now, Azhar Ali, this is in relation to Rochdale, by the way, which we were mentioning there a couple of times. Azhar Ali has since apologised for his comments. Here are the candidates standing in the Rochdale by-election. Azhar Ali, Labour Party. Mark Coleman, Independent. Simon Danchuk, Reform UK. Ian Donaldson, Liberal Democrat. Paul Ellison, Conservative. George Galloway, Workers' Party of Britain. Michael Howarth, Independent. William Howarth, Independent, Guy Otten, Green Party, Raven Rodents of Bortner, official monster Raven Looney, and David Tully, Independent. Right, I've got a heck of a lot of twists and turns still to come for you, but from midnight, a little reminder, make sure that you keep it GB News, because we are going to be live on air for special coverage of the counts in both elections. Tonight, the people decide. So stay up into the small hours to find out how they voted. Keeping you company will be Tom Harwood, Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Alison Pearson, expert pollster Matt Goodwin, Matthew Larser as well, I believe. Sean's had the night off, couldn't be bothered. But we've got loads of people for you as well, a whole host of top guests. Yes, now, I do have a little bit of a shift on from those by-elections there. I do have an exclusive for you now, and I think it's very, very important. And I'll get my panel to react. I know there's a heck of a lot of strong views on this, and I've got no doubt whatsoever that it's going to get a lot of you going. It's an exclusive on the Rochdale child sex gang that has spent the last 3 years fighting deportation to their home countries. The revelation is that their legal aid bill has now cost more than £2 million to the British taxpayer. Brand new Freedom of Information figures released to GB News exclusively show that the 9 men convicted in 2012 of sexual offences, often against children, including rape, trafficking, they have reached an astonishing £2 million of taxpayers' money. £44,000 in publicly funded legal help as well. The money is paid to lawyers acting for the paedophiles at trial, as well as funding years of lengthy appeals against government attempts to send them back to Pakistan. Last month, it was reported that Kwari Abdul Rauf, who's 54 now, he's a former taxi driver and a preacher, don't you know, was still living in the UK nearly 9 years after he was first ordered to be deported by a judge. Our figures show that Ralph, who was told that he would be deported to Pakistan after serving time in prison, has now received, wait for it, £348,000 in legal aid. Absolutely astonishing. Let's just round those. So it's basically 298 grand in legal support, right? His British citizenship has been removed, so he's not even a British citizen anymore, but Pakistan, where he also held citizenship, has reportedly refused to take him back. He was jailed for 6 years after being convicted of conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with children, plural, under the age of 16, and trafficking for sexual exploitation. He was released after just 2.5 years and has since been spotted out and about on the same streets where he trafficked underage British girls for sex. He was meant to be sent to Pakistan along with this chap, Adil Khan, who's now 53. Their lawyers appealed against that decision as well. A further appeal arguing that his deportation would breach his human rights was dismissed in 2022. And in August last year, immigration judges threw out another appeal from Ralph's lawyers. 7 other members of that vile rape paedophile gang have racked up combined legal costs of almost £1.5 million, straight out of your pocket. Joined now by my panel, Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Conservative peer Lord Sean Bailey and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Alison, I mean, this is scandal on top of scandal on top of scandal. That news line tonight, which we can reveal exclusively here on GB News, is that the total amount of money now that the taxpayers have spent on these monsters has gone above £2 million.
And how much has gone to the young women, the survivors of that? So one thing that's behind all you're saying, Patrick, will be these shocking viewers will be very shocked and listeners will be very shocked by this appalling sum of money. What we do know is that in this town and in some of the towns, there are women survivors of those grotesque acts by men like this, and they bump into them in Tesco, which can you imagine what that's like? Someone who has raped you, shared you round his friends, given you drugs to make you obedient, and they're still at large 10, 15 years later. Legal aid is not intended for convicted criminals to use lawyers to exhaust every avenue to prevent you being deported. It's an absolute travesty of what legal aid is intended for.
£2 million of taxpayers' money going to these people who raped kids, in some cases got them pregnant, threatened them with murder. They got 2.5 years in prison for that, and now millions of pounds so that they can just stay and live their normal family life, sure.
We've been talking about the by-election recently, and what we've been talking about is a low turnout. This is the kind of thing that drives a low turnout. People think the country is a joke. You know, you have people who have what we would consider a more legitimate use of legal aid, simply will not get it. You have people who talk about immigration all the time, wanting to let everybody in, want to keep everybody out, but nobody talks about the abuse happening in the system. Now, the fact that you can exhaust the legal system and keep going and keep going and keep going and delay, that needs to be changed. As we discussed the Rwanda bill, there's lots of technicalities in it. And one of the things that it keeps coming up is how many times you can appeal, or if you can appeal at all. We need to go back and completely look at the immigration system again. And the last thing to be said, of course, one of the defences they've been using is that it would be a violation of their human rights. What about the human rights of the young women and young girls that I don't even want to use the word rape, they were convicted. They were convicted of some very serious wrongdoing. What about their legal rights? So when someone says to you that they want to come out of ECHR and some very high-up person says, oh, no, our international representation rep, remember that this is the kind of thing that people see. It's being used to dodge our law to affect our young people.
Your reaction to that GB News exclusive tonight, Matthew, that the legal bill now that taxpayers are paying for these animals has hit £2 million?
Well, look, like everybody, it gives a sense of revulsion. I mean, you know, what occurred with the grooming gangs in towns across the north of England, which was underreported, you know, and was handled incredibly badly by authorities scared of being accused of racism in the early days. I think things got slightly better later on, but we've still seen with Andy Burnham's done a report into Rochdale where he's looked at the particular details there, but we've got similar cases there. So on legal aid is hugely important. One of the things about legal aid is you end up paying to defend some pretty unpleasant people because it's essential that they're represented. Let me just finish, Patrick, because this is really important, which is that in this particular case, clearly, as Sean has said, it is ludicrous that they are being allowed legal aid for appeal after appeal after appeal. That is what really sticks in the throat. Yes, people are entitled to legal aid for a fair trial, no matter how awful the crime that they are being prosecuted for. But it's this endless appeals. And why are we not being able to send people back to Pakistan? We send development aid to Pakistan. Why don't we link it to the development aid? We're writing the cheque, but people won't take people back.
One of the problems as well is they were obviously given very smart legal advice, which is renounce your own Pakistani citizenship. So you can basically shred your own Pakistani passport.
I tell you something now. If we said to Pakistan, these people they're your people, they're Pakistani citizens, and by the way, if you don't take them back, you will not be getting your aid, things would change. Things would change. What we are so busy doing is talking about our international rep. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We have to take firm action to defend our young people. I would take the money back.
OK, right. Well, look, I've just got a statement here from the Ministry of Justice, so it'd be interesting to see what they have to say about all this. One, anyone facing a Crown Court trial is eligible for legal aid, subject to a strict means test. Depending on their means, applicants for criminal legal aid can be required to pay contributions up to the entire cost of the defence if they are convicted of at least one offence with which they are charged. Legal aid in the Courts of Appeal is granted by the court rather than the legal aid agency. Such legal aid is not means-tested, however. It is possible for the Court of Appeal to order the recovery of some or all of the costs of representation at the end of the case. Anyone facing a Crown Court trial does have to do that. So there we go. Right. Coming up, Sadiq Khan is leading the way when it comes to cleaning up the Labour Party.
It certainly shouldn't be acceptable in a party like mine that is proud to be both anti-racist but also anti-Semitic.
Oh, shocker. Don't say that. Anyway, a blunder there from Khan. But the failed London mayor really has outdone himself today. My press pack are standing by to debate the woke virtue signalling ways. We do also have the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you, including an extraordinary intervention from Harry and Meghan, whose spokesman tonight has publicly hit out at claims that it's make-or-break time for the Sussexes by declaring in a statement this couple will not be broken. All of that, and I've been teasing you a clip of a Peruvian dancing bear earlier. I will reveal all. Patrick Christys tonight, only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen to the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
OK, look, let's whiz you through the very first of tomorrow's front pages. Let's do it right now. The Metro, baby boom, ultrasound blast treatment makes dud sperm swim, male fertility breakthrough. There's also a picture of Harry and Meghan there. Let's go to the Eye. UK slips into recession, but squeeze will cut inflation. Hunt believes. OK, that's what the Eye going off on the economy. The Daily Mail, now be bold and go for big tax cuts. And they mean it because big is written in red. As the economy stalls, Chancellor urged to turbocharge growth. OK, there we go. Let's go to The Guardian now, and we go, PM warned against cuts as UK falls into recession. Yeah, there we go. The reason why I am rattling through these more than I would normally do it is because I have a surprise intervention. I'll reintroduce my press pack. I've got Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearce, and I've got Conservative peer Lord Bailey and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. But as you've been hearing, the polls have only just closed in the Kingswood and Wellingborough by-elections, and I'm delighted to say I can discuss these further now with Conservative MP Bob Seeley. Bob, a fantastic, if not somewhat surprising addition to this show. Well done. Right, OK, so how are you feeling after these two by-elections? Are you confident?
The by-elections are not necessarily an indicator of any upcoming general election. Look, I take them with a pinch of salt. They may be painful for us. There may be a painful Rochdale by-election for Labour. Let's see. OK, I mean, look, the worst-case scenario could be an 18% swing in Wellingborough, and let's say that means, a Labour win there. I mean, if that happens, there's going to be letters of no confidence going into Rishi Sunak. The latest poll, so half his cabinet will be voted out in the next election. OK, Patrick, there isn't going to be a vote of confidence of Rishi. Rishi's going to be the Prime Minister, lead us into the next election. That much is clear. Can I just say there is a pattern? And look, I take opinion polls with a pinch of salt, and frankly, by-election results with a pinch of salt as well. But there is a pattern here, which is Conservative voters are staying at home. You look at the Labour vote, sometimes it increases by 1,000, sometimes by 2,000. It is increasing by very small numbers. It's Conservatives are sitting on their hands. Now, if the Conservatives sit on their hands at a general election, we're in trouble. But if we reach out to them and get them out and get them back to support us, and I'm not saying it's a done deal, I'm very, feeling very humble. We're in with a chance. So let's just see what happens.
If the Tories do lose in both Kingswood and Wellingborough, who would you rather lose to, Labour or Reform?
I wouldn't want to lose to anybody, but very simple message for Reform. Any vote for a Conservative party apart from the Conservatives, let's in Labour.
OK, all right. And why do you think it's been such a struggle? Why do you think so many Conservative voters may end up sitting on the... Hey, look, this interview might get played out in a few hours' time and you've won a stonking victory in both seats. Fine, OK, fair play. But if, as expected, that's not the case and there's been a low turnout, why are you struggling to get people off their backsides and to go out and vote on a Thursday evening for the Tories?
There's a bunch of reasons, but basically we've had a torrid few years. Why we had a torrid few years? Because we had COVID and spent 350 billion on lockdowns. I know Alison has an opinion on lockdowns. Frankly, so do I. I think a lot of the data seems to be very flawed and locking down kids and shutting schools, terrible. So we had lockdown, but we spent hundreds of billions. OK, we then had the cost of living crisis caused by the Russian-Ukraine war. The sharp spike, the inflationary spike, and we've had to spend 93 billion. So we've spent nearly £500 billion we didn't think we were going to be spending in 2019. That has shot through the public finances. We're getting them back. It's a struggle. We're fighting to get back. We're getting the ship of state back on course. I would just say I don't believe for 1 second that Labour are the answer. I think they would be dreadful. But what we need to do is make sure we stay the course. We need to get inflation down. Yes, we need to cut taxes as well. And we need to get those growth policies kicking in. Just to confirm then, Bob, if you lose both of these by-elections, that's 10 since the start of this Parliament. You are adamant, you are absolutely adamant that Rishi Sunak is going to be leading you into the next general election. Of course. I mean, I'm sorry. Anyone who sort of wants to brief anything else, it's just a mug's game. Forget it. Look, can I just say, what we need to do, and we are increasingly doing this, is remembering that unity is a really critical factor. I know that we have our critics, that we need to go further. We need to be more conservative. I think there are people like me in the Conservative Party who listen carefully to those arguments. But actually, above all, we need to be united and make sure that we stay united and let Labour fall to pieces over Gaza or anti-Semitism or any of the other things or plagiarism or not having a clue what they're on about. Bob, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you coming on at what must have been incredibly short notice because I didn't even know you were coming on. So thank you very much, Bob Seeley there. Great. OK, look, a couple of things to get into there. He was saying that Rishi Sunak will definitely be in charge of the Tories at the next election. And he also was saying, well, we need to do party unity. Well, they weren't thinking that when they got rid of Boris Johnson, were they? They're running out of time, Patrick. I mean, there's going to be a bloodbath tonight, I'm quite confident. And then we've got the May local elections when that's going to be bloodbath to the power of 10. They probably won't replace him. I personally think they should just go for one of the girls and minimise the losses. But he's deluded, Bob Seeley. I like him very much. I think he's a great MP. He is deluded to say there's no correlation between the by-elections and the general election. The Conservative safe seats are falling like skittles. This is much worse than 1997, in my opinion. We'll return to this, but it is worth noting that if an 18% swing, potentially, in Wellingborough would be massive. And I'm sure over the course of our coverage with Statman Tom Harwood between midnight and 6 a.m, he's going to be articulating to you, possibly a few times, exactly how important this will be. But look, coming up, the UK has tipped back into a recession. Does Chancellor Jeremy Hunt need to walk? Well, find out whether or not he's going to be a Greatest Britain or a Union jackass. I think you can probably guess. Plus, my press pack remains to take you through the remainder of tomorrow's newspaper front pages and who is behind the mask of this very cute
Valentine's Day teddy bear, yes, which you saw for about a second there in Peru. All will be revealed. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
OK, I've got more front pages for you now. Let's see what they're saying. We go, the Daily Express. Now just do it. British Gas told to cut prices after record profit. Absolutely, seriously, we have been falling foul to, in my view, a bit of a racket. Now, The Independent. Sunak braced for double poll blow as recession bites. Labour taunts Prime Minister. He's promised to grow the economy's in tatters. This recession, 0.3%. There we go. And also that big picture of that Super Bowl parade horror that left 1 dead and children wounded, the Kansas City shooting. We go to The Telegraph. Hunt to shelve 2p income tax. I think I've read this headline a few times. I've certainly read other headlines a few times. Is he going to do it? I don't know. Probably not. Farage threat to NatWest share sale over failure to resolve debanking. Nigel Farage has warned the incoming chief executive of NatWest that he will try to scupper the sale of the taxpayer-funded bank unless they change their culture. Farage is not letting go, is he? Like an XL bully. The Times. Don't rush to rewrite staff rights, Labour told. Bit of a snooze fest, that. The Mirror. Recession. Yeah, difficult to say unless you're Sean Connery. Right, OK, so let's go over again to my wonderful panel. I'm joined by my press pack Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Conservative peer Lord Bailey and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. So, look, the Labour Party is once again being torn apart by these anti-Semitism accusations. They probably didn't need this blunder from the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan.
Sort of language isn't acceptable, and it certainly shouldn't be acceptable in a party like mine that is proud to be both anti-racist but also anti-Semitic.
And we'll come back to some of those...
beg your pardon, tackling anti-Semitism.
Anyway, the reason why Sadiq Khan was standing awkwardly on a train platform is because he announced today that he will rename London Overground train lines, creating the Windrush Line, the Lioness Line, the Suffragette Line. Khan says the new system will help the visually impaired, but also admitted not everyone's going to be happy. Well, too right. But thankfully, the lovely people at Spiked magazine have created a slightly more realistic rebrand based on Khan's things there. The County Line, the Lineker Line, the Shamima Line, the Captain Tom Line, the Free Palace Line and the Gender Affirming Care Line. So, panel, not Sadiq Khan's finest day.
I don't often say the phrase "to be fair to Sadiq Khan," but to be fair to Sadiq Khan, it's quite hard to say anti-Semitism, isn't it? So,
it is.
So it was a bit of a mouthful. I'm not entirely opposed to all his woke train lines. Actually, I quite like the Windrush line. I think that's okay. I mean, we can move on from naming them after royals and geographical areas. In my view, we thought the Pankhurst line.
Yes, it was a bit catchy. The suffragettes.
The
one thing I will say, naming them after geographical places is often important to the line. It makes them more memorable.
Yes.
You know, it goes through that place. The Piccadilly line jumps to mind. But this idea that you have to so greatly pander is the problem. I think he could have been... Somebody should have taken into account, we like alliteration. The English spoken words works with alliteration. They should have taken that into account, not the fact that he wants a virtue signal so much.
6.9 million quid is...
That's the important thing. He spent 6.9 million quid on this. He should be concentrating on delivering...
To be fair, they were going to... They had... Because the overground had got so big, which is the orange at the moment on the London Underground map, they had to separate it out and spend the money. But our airport's going to be next, because, of course, the Americans spend, you know, you've got Ronald Reagan National Airport, and all we've got John Lennon in Liverpool, and George Best.
Listen, what the Americans spend their money on is the Americans' business. He's spending our money, our hard-earned cash, with a cost of living problem on this nonsense. There's many other things he should be concentrating on.
Massive taxpayer-funded virtue signalling
Exactly.
would be one way of looking at it. Now, I'm desperate to get this in, OK, because when I think of Valentine's Day, I think flowers, chocolate, soppy cards. Maybe something else as well. But for the Peruvian police this year, it also happened to be the perfect day to catch a suspected drug dealer. One lucky officer donned a cuddly bear outfit and, armed with nothing more than a balloon and some chocolates, they got down on one knee in an apparent profession of love. Well, the suspect couldn't resist and was lured out onto the street only to be pounced on by the cuddly bear, who's an undercover officer. This is real. This is not a joke, OK? Never judge a bear by its cover. Grief. So, I mean, that...
What would Paddington have said?
Yeah.
Who was from Peru?
What
Paddington have said?
Well, Paddington's got off the rails recently, actually.
Can you imagine? Steady, I'm Lord Paddington. Let's be steady, but Paddington's one of our favourites. Could you imagine that when you were in jail and someone said to you, "So how do you get out?" I was arrested by Paddington.
I got nicked by a bear.
Yeah, you'd have to make it up, wouldn't you? You'd have to make it up.
You'd have to say it was a swat.
Well, because you couldn't make it up, you'd have to make it up.
Paddington smuggled marmalade rather than something, something a bit harder, didn't he? Yes.
Well, exactly. Well, look, I just want to remind you all, OK, that from midnight we will stay live on air for special coverage of the counts in Wellingborough and the Kingswood by-elections. Tonight, the people decide to stay up with us on GB News to find out how they voted. And keeping you company this evening will be Tom Harwood, Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Alison Pearson, Matthew Larser, expert pollster Matt Goodwin. It's an unrivalled lineup. But now we just about have time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Alison, Greatest Britain, please.
Quite a serious one, Patrick. Rabbi Zakaria Deutsch, a chaplain at Leeds University. The rabbi and his wife and children are currently forced into hiding after receiving death threats from the pro-Palestine mob because the rabbi was a chaplain for the Israeli Defence Force. I just want to say to Rabbi Deutsch, this is not what Britain is about. Millions of us stand with you and your family and against the people who hate you and who are anti-Semitic. God bless you.
Oh, gosh. OK, Alison. Well, thank you very much for that. Go on, Sean. Who's your Greatest Britain?
My Greatest Britain is 8 officers from the police gang and proactive team who are off duty, who saw altercation, had no equipment, and they got involved and prevented a stabbing, a knife incident, which is really important. Lots of communities have their problems with the police, and they've had very low ratings as well, particularly amongst women, etc. But this is really what the police are about: the men and women who put themselves at risk to keep us all safe in London. Wow. Let's hope we can see more of this kind of performance from the police and less criticism.
We have seen
10-minute walk from my house.
Is it? Is that you on the floor there?
Is that your gang?
Is that your gang? No, we have actually seen, look, for all of the battering that the police do get sometimes, and they do, rightly so sometimes in my view, there's been a couple of standout incidents for me. There's this one, and there's the Watch gang lot that they smashed as well. So fair play, well done.
Well, they're both great nominations, but I mean, mine is a Liverpool man called David Clark. He inherited 100 grand, but decided he had enough money already, even though he doesn't seem to be that rich. He's a delivery driver part-time. So he did a shout-out in Toxteth, one of the most challenged places in Britain, with riots there in the 80s. He picked 12 people from the people who replied, got them together, and they decided how they could spend the 100 grand in the community, and he gave it away.
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow. I don't know what I'm going to choose tonight, to be honest. It's a bit... I have chosen, but it's... I went for the Met Police. But, yeah, we're going to stick with that. But, look, to be honest, I mean, they're actually all genuinely brilliant. So, anyway, right. Who's Union Jackass, Alison?
It's Helen Thomas, the head of Radio 2. Helen said some lovely things this week about DJ Steve Wright, who sadly died. The problem is that Helen approved the sacking of Steve Wright from Radio 2, causing him to apparently be heartbroken. Two-faced hypocrite, Helen Thomas. You deprived Steve of a wonderful job.
OK, go on, Sean, we're running out of time, Ben.
My Union Jackass is Sadiq Khan for horrific waste of public money to virtue signal when he happens to have an election coming up. Spend that money on making the rail system better.
All right, go on, Matthew.
And Rishi Sunak for delivering us Rishi's recession.
Short and sweet, this guy. Right, OK, the winner of the Union Jackass Award today is Helen Thomas. There we go. Who is, I am at pains to stress, is not here to defend herself. Good. Right, OK. Thank you very much, everybody, for a wonderful show. I have thoroughly enjoyed it this evening. Please, please, please keep it GB News. Why? Well, we've got headliners next, so they're going to go through all the papers in the way that only they really can, and then wallop, coming in like a wrecking ball from midnight until 6 o'clock in the morning. We've got the one and only Tom Harwood and an absolutely stellar lineup, including Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and 2 out of the 3 people on my panel here, because it is by-election night. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Mwah.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Friday's going to be a much drier and brighter day for many of us, but we have still got some heavy rain to come through the rest of the evening. That's as a result of this weather front that's slowly pushing eastwards across the country through the rest of the day and through tonight. So there's still some heavy rain to come across parts of the southwest. That'll push into the Midlands later on this evening and then into the southeast, but rain should be fairly limited by the time it arrives into the southeast. Behind it, it should turn much clearer as well. So some clear spells to come tonight, but still got very mild air. So it will be another very mild night tonight, frost-free across the country by tomorrow morning. There'll also be some early sunshine, particularly across eastern areas of Scotland, as well as central areas of England too tomorrow morning. And we'll see a good deal of sunshine through the day. Some thicker cloud across parts of northwestern England, North Wales, that could be thick enough to bring some drizzly rain. But in any of the sunshine, it'll feel fairly pleasant. Highs of 13 or 14 degrees in the south or 12 degrees further north. A bright start to Saturday across eastern areas, but cloud will thicken through the day as this weather front approaches. So some drizzly rain in the west through the morning, and then a heavy spell of rain to come through the evening across western areas and perhaps on Sunday morning in the east. But once that clears on Sunday, it should be a fairly dry and bright day for many of us, and it will be staying mild all through the weekend. See you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger. And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major